Hi, so I'm doing a franchise ranking video here for the Fantom Killer franchise. Quite an obscure series of films. Probably most people probably haven't even heard of the films, let alone seen all four in the series. But going to do a video here talking about them. And they're a series of four films spanning from 1998 to 2008, all directed by a man called Roman Nowitzki or something like that. But it's actually an alias for, I believe, a British guy called Trevor Barley. Kind of a mix of UK, Poland, and Czech Republic in terms of the country of origin. I think they might have been mainly shot in Poland and the UK. A little bit of Czech Republic for the fourth one, maybe. The first one is quite readily available. The one that you see here is quite easy to find. It's released by Massacre Video, so it's a bit more mainstream than the other ones. The others tend to be a bit more rare, a bit more expensive. And some of the copies for the sequels don't actually come with subtitles as well, so you need to be a bit careful in terms of what you buy. So the films are all kind of a mix of giallo, slasher, and soft porn erotica. Some better than others, but none of them are really very good. So unless this mix of this kind of melting pot of genres really appeals to you, then I'd say that it already speaks to you. Then I'd say they're all best avoided. Really, they're all pretty bad. But also there are a couple of spin-off films, I believe, that were following these called The Phantom Seducer, but by the same director, but as far as I can tell, these don't actually feature any returning characters or actors. So it's not really a proper part of this franchise, really. It's just something with a similar name by the same director, but I think those are more porn-based than these are. And these are pretty bad, so those must be even worse. But anyway, let's get into the ranking then. Like I say, they're all pretty bad, but I've had to actually modify the front covers for some of them because they show nudity. So let's get into it with what I consider to be the worst of the four. We're going to go from worst to best, in my view. And the worst one is the fourth one, I think, which you see here. Like you say, I've had to put a sticker over it to cover the breasts. So let's get into it. The positive things about this one is that it did have better production values than some of the others. It does change it up with the locations and with the actors as well, which tend to be quite samey in the other ones. But this one was a bit different, a bit more fresh there. Although it possibly loses some of the charm in doing that. There is a creepy bit as well where the killer kind of posing as a scarecrow in a cornfield that works really well. It's definitely the best thing about the whole film. Negatives with this one though is that it's much more sexual and like a bad porn film than the other ones are, more explicit, and I find those bits kind of really boring, so I didn't like that. And it doesn't mention anything about the cliffhanger that the third film ended on, so that was bad continuity there. And the killer now has a more kind of the look of the killer is one of the best things about the films, but unfortunately here they kind of change it up a little bit and give him a different mask, and it doesn't look as good in my opinion. It kind of harkens back to the first film as well in that it's very silly. Numbers 2 and 3 were a bit more serious, but this one's very silly, much like the original. And also there's terrible audio with this one. All the other 3 films have subtitles, but this one is kind of done in English, but it's really bad, and it almost like the actors don't really know what they're saying, and it's just it just sounds really weird. So that's the worst one in my opinion. Moving on now to what I consider to be the next worst one, which is the one that I showed at the start, the original. I can actually show the back of this one because there's no nudity on it. All the others have got too many breast shots and such on the back for me to show you. The positives for this one is that it does introduce the figure of the Fantom Killer himself, who, like I said, looks really good. It's definitely the best thing about the whole franchise, I would say, is the appearance of the killer. You can maybe see a little bit of him there, but it's probably too far off for you to make out many details. There's also a piece of music that is introduced here, with it being the first one that later became kind of synonymous with the franchise. It's actually pretty catchy, it's pretty good. It does kind of get repetitive because they kind of use it continuously throughout the film, and after you've heard it once, you've heard it 1,000 times kind of thing, but it is good the first time, and it is kind of cool, to be fair. And there are some stylish camera work at times, nice use of close-ups and that kind of thing, and the sort of use of mist to kind of create silhouettes and stuff like that, and there are some nice visual moments. But on the bad side, is that it's extremely silly, like I said about the previous one, number 4. Very silly, very unrealistic, absolutely ridiculous at times. It's just so unbelievably bad. Also, there can kind of a confusing ending where it isn't clear how one of the characters dies. I was a bit confused. I had to kind of watch it with the commentary on at the end just to make sense of what was going on. And there's also this kind of like subplot of the cops searching for the killer. It doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't really get properly resolved. So it kind of it's kind of left up in the air. It's a bit of a weak ending there. So that's the next worst one. So moving on to slightly the better films now, in my opinion, from the franchise. And number 2, Fantom Killer 2 is the next one that I've got. This one takes itself a bit more seriously, a bit more focus on the plot this time and less on the kind of silly porn antics. It's got good continuity to some extent, as well as it does kind of continue on with the theme of the killer being the manifestation of male characters' contempt towards women. One of the regular actresses, I believe her name is something like Katerina Zadik or something like that, probably has what I thought was her best scene in this one, working as like an undercover cop. Still really silly, but an undercover prostitute, I should say. She is a cop and she's working as she's kind of pretending to be a prostitute, I should say. And that was probably one of the better scenes. Well, still very, very sleazy and very, very silly, but it's one of the more entertaining pieces, I thought, from the franchise. On the negative, though, it's still really unrealistic at times. For example, this character that I'm just talking about, who's doing the undercover work, he's like talking to her boss on like a hidden microphone, but she's actually in the car with the killer as she's talking to him, which sounds like a normal conversation with her boss who's elsewhere, which is like sitting right next to the killer, but it's supposed to be like an incognito conversation, but she's right next to him, so it just comes across as really bizarre and really stupid. That's just one example of the silliness that this franchise presents. There's also a bit of a weak death at the very start when it's not really sure that it's not really very clear that someone's even supposed to be dead. It's kind of very strangely done. This one just kind of like hanging up in a vehicle, but there's no blood or anything, so it looks really weird. Also, there's too many kind of goings on in these woodlands. It's a bit unrealistic that there'd be like prostitutes out there in the middle of the woods, but it's where they'd be kind of operating in like a more suburban area. So it's a bit weird there as well. And I just kind of, like I say, started to reuse the same music here that had been milked to death already in the original. So to have it again here and throughout the franchise after this one, it can be a bit quite repetitive at this point. So it got a bit irritating. So on to the last film then, and what I consider to be the best one in the franchise, not that that's saying much, is the third one. This one takes a slightly different approach, focusing on a woman's plight at a garage for some of the running time, so it feels a bit more different from the previous films. And actually, at one point, this woman gains the upper hand over the gentlemen that are kind of causing her problems, so she kind of triumphs over them briefly. So it's slightly less misogynistic than the other films, which are all very, very sleazy, very sexual, and very, like I say, misogynistic. But this one's slightly less so. So that was good. The cop double act here, they've kind of got a subplot going on where there are two cops, similar to the first film, but it's better handled here, where they're kind of trying to catch the killer, and they're quite entertaining together. I thought they were a bit better than the cops from the first one. And this subplot is a bit more fleshed out here. And probably the best thing about this one is that there's quite a surprising twist at the end that really kind of caught me off guard. And it does end, to be fair, on quite an exciting cliffhanger. It's just a shame that it doesn't get picked up on in the fourth film. It just gets completely ignored, but it is a decent ending for this one. Negatives are that there's a really, really boring strip and dancing segment towards the end when the cops visit a strip club, and it just goes on forever. It's way too long. This is kind of a hallmark of this franchise as a whole. The stripping scenes go on for a dog's age. It's just way too long. They become boring very, very quickly, but this one has one at the end that just goes on forever. Really, I can't fathom why they thought to include it at that length, but the film as a whole is probably a bit over long. It probably could have been trimmed down by about 10 minutes, so this one is slightly too long. Feels a bit bloated, and there's also a bit at the beginning. There's kind of a scene that feels a bit bloated, like I say, as well as it goes on for a bit too long. There's like this strip scene with a car, and it goes on for with a woman posing on a car, and it goes on for too long. Gets a bit tedious, but on the whole, it's a better film, I would say, than the other ones. The best thing being there's kind of a triumphant moment for one of the females that actually gets the upper hand over males at one point, which is very rare for this franchise. It might be the only time that it happens in the whole series of films. So there you have it then. Not a very good franchise, not one that I'd recommend, but it's kind of one that's not really talked about much, so I thought I'd do a video. That's the most readily available one. You can get this quite easily on eBay and such for decent prices, but the other ones quite hard to find, but don't even bother because they're not worth it. Okay, thanks for watching and goodbye.